Hey guys, let's see what mess I got myself into this time around. So I found this table on the side of the road after a rainy day. At first glance, it didn't look too bad, but it was actually in pretty rough conditions. It had some major water damage, especially on the bottom shelf. You can see how thick this is. It's thicker than my finger. On the other side, there was also some major damage. Like this bubble is so big. At first, I thought it was the table itself. And then the legs were also split in quite a few areas. And finally, you can see here with the way the light hits the top of the table that the piece was so damaged at the top as well. And with that, I went to work. First thing I did was give the entire piece a really good scrubbing with some soap and water, especially since it had been outside on the curb for God knows how long. With the table nice and clean, I needed to disassemble it. There was no way I could give this a proper rehab without separating it into pieces. As I was disassembling, I saw that this coffee table was actually from Pier 1, so that was actually pretty cool. With the table disassembled into pieces, it was time to sand it down. I used an 80 grit sandpaper to sand the entire piece. I wanted to reduce and smooth as much of the water damage as I possibly could without getting into that particle board. My idea for this piece was to create a two-tone farmhouse coffee table. So I'm just sanding it enough to where it's smooth and where I can paint the legs of the table and give the tabletop a beautiful stain. So as I was sanding the tabletop, it looks like it was actually some type of plastic. It really wasn't sanding off as wood or veneer, but it also had that water damage. So I'm guessing that there's like some type of particle board underneath, and then there's some type of plastic on top. And just to be honest, I'm not sure what I was dealing with. But what I did know was that regardless of what material this was, I needed to level out this tabletop. With all the pieces sanded down, I made sure to clean them off and remove any excess dust that they had. And with that, I reassessed what needed to be repaired. First off, the legs. One of the legs was completely split. All of the other legs just needed to be filled in here and there. So with some Gorilla Glue, I filled in the leg that was completely split. Then, using some furniture clamps, I applied pressure to ensure the glue adhered both pieces together. When using this wood glue, I always like to remove the excess with a clean, wet towel, just so that it's easier to maneuver. And then when you're trying to sand it down a little bit later, it's also easier. For the legs that didn't need the glue, all I did is I filled them in with some plastic wood. And once they were dry, I sanded them down with an 80 grit sandpaper. Now, remember how I originally wanted to stain the tabletop? Well, with this type of material, it was actually not going to be possible. So I had to pivot. As you guys may know, the faux wood concept is very popular lately, painting that wood-like effect on your furniture. And so I figured out why not give it a try. To keep the idea of that two-tone farmhouse that I originally wanted, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work and I have to pivot again, or it does work and it will look great. And with that in mind, I had to apply a layer of all-purpose primer to all of the pieces, the tabletop, the frame, and the legs. Once the primer was nice and dry, I lightly sanded everything down with a 220 grit sandpaper, and I cleaned all the dust residue with a wet rag. By the way, I did notice a couple areas that needed some extra wood filler once I added that primer, so I went ahead and I added additional wood filler to ensure that all the gaps were fully covered. For the legs and the frame of the table, I decided to paint them in this compass blue color. I applied 2 layers of paint, lightly sanding in between each layer and cleaning them off. Okay, for the main event, let's prep the tabletop to create that faux wood look. After applying an even coat of all-purpose primer, I used a white bone color to paint the top. I applied 2 layers of this paint to ensure that the surface was evenly coated. This light cream is going to be the base, and it's very important for it to be even, especially since the original color of this was a dark brown. This is going to help keep the uniformity of the color throughout the tabletop when adding the actual stain. I used Varathane wood stain in American walnut color. As I was applying this stain, I really wasn't happy. I wanted this to be more of a brown color, not this red undertone color. And this definitely had major red undertones, not what I was looking for. Because most wood stains are oil-based, I had to use some mineral spirits to clean this off. It's really simple. I applied a little bit of mineral spirits on a rag and then I just rubbed it off. Then with a little bit of soap and water, I cleaned it off once again. After I was done, you can kind of see that the first two panels have that darker edge to it, but it's not going to be enough to make a difference in the end result. So I left it as is. Okay, with a clean slate, I started all over again with Varathane wood stain in a Western oak color. With a clean brush, I applied a generous amount of stain, not enough to where it was dripping everywhere, but enough to where the entire panel was covered with the stain. The other thing I did that's very important is to ensure you have some even strokes going in the same direction, typically horizontally with the panel. That is going to be very important. I covered about 3 panels at a time. The reason I did this was to allow the first 2 to semi-dry before the next step. When I was doing the original walnut color, I realized if the stain dries a little bit, it is easier to give it that faux wood effect. If it's too wet, it's gonna bring all that stain with it and it's just not gonna look good. So definitely let it dry just a little bit. Okay, then using a 5-inch block deck polyester blend flat stain brush, whew, that's a mouthful. I lightly brushed over the stain to remove any excess. I used a clean cloth to remove any of that stain on the actual brush. Then I lightly tapped the tip of the brush against the stain, again going horizontally, following the already brushed on stain. This is going to be giving that faux wood look. This will give it some dimension, it's going to give it some density to the stain, and it's going to look pretty cool. There you go. This is a different angle. I hope it helps. By the way, it's okay if it's not looking perfectly even, because if you think of wood, it's not smooth, it's not even. Some areas are a little bit darker and some areas are a little bit lighter. So that's what you're looking for here. Once I was done, this is what it looked like. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit nervous because I had never done this technique, but I love it. It looks great. I think it came out really nice and I was so excited. I'm still excited. I hope I can try it again in a future project soon. And maybe I can improve my technique and keep doing some other ideas. I did wait overnight to let it dry. Again, it's oil-based stain, it's on top of paint, so it's gonna take a little bit longer to dry. But once it was dry, I simply took a 400 grit sandpaper and gave it a light sanding before sealing them. Oh, and of course, I wiped it down to remove any dust residue. To seal the piece, I used Behr polyurethane in a matte finish. If you've seen any of my videos, you probably know that I always like to add a little bit of paint into my polyurethane, especially when sealing a dark color. This is going to help avoid any cloudiness that could happen. For the tabletop, I simply apply the polyurethane as is. I know it looks like it's adding some white cloudy layers to the finish, but once this dries, you won't be able to see that at all. I did apply 2 layers of polyurethane to the entire piece, and I lightly sanded with a 400 grit sandpaper in between each layer. And after a couple of days, here we are. It is time to stage for final pictures. Okay, guys, we took this coffee table that I found on the side of the road after a rainy day, so it had a lot of water damage, and we transformed it into a beautiful 2-tone farmhouse table. I love it. As you can tell, I didn't add that bottom piece back to this table. It was so damaged that I didn't think I would even be able to bring it back, and I just thought it wouldn't be worth it. And even with that, I still love how this blue color contrasts with the brown tabletop stain. The faux wood finish came out way better than I expected. And I will be incorporating this technique into more of my projects, and hopefully we'll be improving it with time. I'm really excited. I'm super happy on how this table came out. I really was worried about the water damage on the entire thing, but to be honest, you can't really see it. And if you didn't know any better, you probably would never guess that this had so much water damage. I hope you guys enjoy this video and try to apply that faux wood technique on your next project. I thought it was going to be harder than what it was, and it was so much fun to experiment and learn something new. I'll make sure to add a list of supplies I used for this project and their links in the description below. If you like this video, please share with your friends and make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. This really helps me out and it doesn't cost you a thing. Thank you guys once again for all of your support. And for now, I'm going to say goodbye and I'll see you guys next time here at Angie's Crafts Furniture Renovation. Bye.